So welcome. And as always, I want to thank the people who watch these recordings and again, appreciate any likes, whatever, or comments that you might have to make. And I know that some of you seem to be watching it on a regular basis, and I'm very happy to see that. And I hope that's because you find it interesting. So I feel very privileged to share this information with you. With that said, we'll go ahead and start with a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
Here we are. And so again, remember, we are still dealing with that campaign that the Israelites waged against the Midianites. And it was a very successful campaign, very successful campaign. So you'll see what I mean perhaps later on, how successful. Ve'et kol arehem, and all their cities, b'moshvotam, in their settlements, ve'et kol tirotam, we discussed this before, right? And their palaces, their castles, maybe their temples, sarfu ba'esh, they burnt in fire. So translating this more as their temples makes, the idolatrous temples makes much more sense, because that in fact would be a place that they would burn as part of fulfilling a commandment. And here is, of course, the Aramaic translation, and sigidaton means their prostration. Beit, of course, is houses. Sigdaton is their prostrating themselves. And we actually have that word in the Be'ana Rachetz that we say on Saturday morning, the lo sagidna, we don't bow down to any other idol or any other God except Hashem. All right, so that's where we are there. Yeah, I think we finished up the Rashi on that as well. Okay. Vayikhu et kol hashalal, they took all the spoil, ve'et kol hamalkoach, and all the booty, ba'adam, whether human, uvav hema, or whether in cattle. They appropriated all of this. Let's take a look at Rashi on this. Vayikhu et kol hashalal, they took all the spoil, etc. Magid, this actually tells you, shayu ksherim, that they were honorable, right? They were kosher people, v'tzadikim, and righteous people. V'lo nechshadu al hagezel, and they were not to be suspected of robbery or theft, lishloach yad babiza, to help themselves, again, biza, the spoil, shelo bishut, unless it was with permission. In other words, they didn't just appropriate it, and you'll see a little later on that even though they took this, they did not take it for themselves at this point. And it says, Shene'emar et kol hashalal v'gomer, because I believe he's saying here later on, right? It's going to talk about how all the spoils they took had to be divided up in a particular way. So this is a lovely thought, that taxation is legitimation, that the fact that we are taxed has its implications regarding the legitimacy of the income that we make. Because clearly, when you steal stuff, you don't declare it for taxation. So it's just an interesting take on this. Let's see. V'alehem mefurash b'Kabbalah, and regarding these people that we're talking about here, it's expressed in the Song of Songs. Kabbalah is a way of referring to the writings in the Tanakh, right? It's another way of referring to it as Kabbalah. Here we go. Shinecha ke'eder harechelim. Your teeth are like a flock of ewes. So we understand we see the Song of Songs traditionally as this grand metaphor of the relationship between God and the Jewish people. And of course, your teeth are what you bite, you consume, right? You use your teeth to consume things. And so it's referring to what they consumed there, but they are like a flock of ewes in something beautiful that they weren't just helping themselves and stealing stuff. Af anshe hamelchama, even the men of war, shavecha kulam tzadikim, right? They're, I believe, shavecha has to do with shivya, something like that, perhaps. That it's referring to what they took. Kulam tzadikim, they were all righteous people. Shalal, so there's several words that are used here. Shalal, Shevi, Baz, they're all Baziza, they're all referring to spoils and booty and plunder and things like that. They're words that refer to that. So Rashi tries to give us a little bit of clarification as to the denotation of these words. So he says, when it comes to Shalal, it is a metaltalin, shel malbush v'tachshitin. That shalal refers to metaltalim, or movable goods. Shel malbush is something you wear, in other words, clothing. V'tachshitim are ornaments. So shalal refers to clothing and ornaments. Baz, okay, or bezizah, hu bizat metaltalin she'enam tachshitim. So this refers to taking a spoil that are, again, movable goods, but are not ornaments and assumingly clothing. So they have to do with other kinds of things that one might appropriate. Malkoach, and that's, again, so this is another word that they use. So this is from lakach, right, to take. So perhaps we can, again, it's hard to find exact English equivalents to these particular Hebrew words. But again, it has to do, if we have a word, and it should be, I think, and I'm just skipping on it right now, forgive me, maybe one of you can think of it. It has to do with Adam uvema. This has to do with people. In other words, living creatures that are taken in war. Captives. There we go. But here it doesn't just refer to human captives, it also refers to other animals, cattle. Uvamakom shekatuv shevi etzel malkoach. So when the word shevi is written next to the word malkoach, it refers to shevi ba'adam. So in that case, the shevi refers to the human beings, the human captives. Umalkoach, and the word malkoach there means bevheima, refers to cattle. So again, Rashi's trying to give us a clarification of the Hebrew and what these Hebrew words actually determine. Next verse. Here we go. Vayaviu el Moshe ve'el Elazar hakohen, and they brought to Moses and Elazar the priest, ve'el adat b'nei Yisrael, and to the community of the children of Israel, et hashvi, the captives, the et hamalkoach. So here, according to Rashi, we would translate this as the cattle, right? The animals, the et hashalal, and that would be referred to the other items that they had taken in war. El hamachaneh, they brought them to the camp. El arvot Moav, to the plains of Moab. Asher al Yarden Yeracho, near the Jordan, near Jericho. I don't believe there's Rashi on this. Let me double check. No Rashi. Here we go. Vayetzu Moshe ve'Elazar haKohen, and Moses and Elazar the Kohen, the priest, v'chol nesiei ha'edah, and all the chieftains of the community, likratam, to greet them, to meet them, right? El michutz la'machaneh, outside the encampment. So Rashi's going to go zero right into this outside the encampment. Why? They didn't wait for them to come into the camp. So there was a reason. Here it is. Vayetzu Moshe ve'Elazar haKohen, Moses and Elazar the Kohen, it said, went out. Lefi, why? Shira'u et na'arei Yisrael. This is interesting. Just in the opposite, they saw that. So in other words, they didn't wait for them to come there. They hopped to it and went outside the camp. And here Rashi is telling us that according to tradition, the reason they did is because they saw the youths of Israel, Yotzim, going out, Lachtov min habizah, to seize some of this plunder, some of this spoils. So again, trying to understand a little bit better what they're saying is that these would not be, I think, the people who actually went out. Remember the thousands that were selected from each tribe. These would be very young people going out to help themselves. So it's not the people he was referring to before who were kasher and who were righteous people. Vayiktzov Moshe, Moses was angry. Ketzef is anger. Moses was angry al pekudei hechayil, over the officers of the troops. Sarei alafim, the captains of thousands. V'sarei hameot, and captains of hundreds. Habaim mitzavah hamilchama, who were coming from the field of battle. I'm translating this loosely, okay? Remember, tzava really means military service. I believe the word tzava has more to do with service in this case, in battle, of the battle. Let's check this out. Let's see if there's a, right here, I believe. Here it is. Vayiktzov Moshe, Moses became angry. This is really an important Rashi here, as you'll see. Al pekudei hachayil, over the elected ones or the officers of the troops. Mamunim al hachayil, so pekudei hachayil, who were elected, who were selected over the troops. And what this does is it teaches us shekol sirachon hador, that whatever decay takes place in the generation, right? So sirachon, like, is putrefaction, something disgusting, something that smells. So in other words, if a particular generation starts to go downwards in terms of their morals or their behavior, talui b'gedolim, and it hangs upon the gedolim, the great people of that generation. In other words, essentially the leaders, the people who have achieved a distinguished status in that generation. Why? Sheyesh koach b'yadam, because they have, literally it says, the power in their hands. Remember, I said that the word hand connotes control. They have the ability, limchot, to prevent this from happening. So being in a leadership position, which if you have the authority, right, goes along the responsibility, right? You can't, if you have the authority, then you have the responsibility. If you have the responsibility and you're not given the authority, then you don't really have the responsibility. They have to go together. Let's go on. So how did he express this anger? Vayomer Elohem Moshe, Moses said to them, Hechiyitem kol nekeva, did you allow all the females to remain alive? Hein heina hayu, indeed they were the ones, hayu livnei Israel, who came to the men of Israel, vidvar Bil'am, regarding the matter of Bil'am, limsor mal, to commit a trespass, in other words, to act improperly, Bashem, regarding God, al dvar Peor, with regard, and in connection with Peor, this god of the Moabites, right? Vatahi hamagefa, and consequently there was the plague, ba'adat Hashem, in the community of Israel. Give me one moment. Let's see. Okay, Judith, if you want to ask your question. please? Or should I just quote you? Okay.
I didn't know you had gone on so far. I didn't know when you would want to bring it up. Sorry.
No problem. Okay,
I'm just wondering,
yes.
if mitzvah and tzava, yeah, I know it's not the same, but are they related or could they be related?
So
Because they're both service.
I understand. Right. So it's a good question. Normally, I would say that a bet, because mitzvah is spelled with a vav, right, and not with a bet, it's spelled with a whole different letter. For those of you who are joining us and who don't know, this is a vav. This is a letter vav here that I'm pointing, and you'll see that the word mitzvah here, a mitzvah, is not spelled that way. And normally, that would tell you that it's a whole different root, different connection. So that's true, but they do sound very similar, as Judith has pointed out.
I thought with a vav it was turtle.
Okay.
Tzav.
Yeah, you're right. Tzav, right. And that, I'm not sure if that's, yeah. Remember, this is with an aleph. That aleph counts as part of the root, okay? So why a tzav, if it's spelled, I don't remember how tzav is spelled, but if tzav is spelled with a vav, I don't know that it's necessary. What the connection of turtle and commandment would be, I would have to really.
No, it's turtle and service.
Then it's with a bet.
War service.
Make a sense, right? But again, this a turtle is spelled without the aleph, okay? And
But I'm not talking about mitzvah. I'm talking about, she was asking about the word service that
yes.
you said was spelled with a vav.
No, that's commandment.
Oh, this is service. This word is service.
We're talking about
okay.
Armed service.
I gotcha.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Confusion there. Right. This is
okay.
Armed services. Yes.
That's okay.
What that refers to.
So right, there's no aleph in turtle.
Right, right. So at any rate, and I would have to start looking at a dictionary and seeing, how the dictionary translates this word tzava, which I think they do in several different ways, and seeing if there's some original derivation there. I'm just trying to work with a translation that makes sense here, but I believe that's sort of the implication here. At any rate, remember, Moses is getting angry here with the people, with the leaders, because they spared the women. And he's saying, but it was what the women did that got them all into this trouble. In other words, they wouldn't be having this war now if the women had not come and seduced the men into serving God, into serving idols, forgive me, okay, and fornicating. So let's take a look at the Rashi here. As I said, this is where we start to get into stuff that's very hard to swallow, right? Hein Heina, these are the ones, they're the ones. Magid, Shayu Makirim Otam. So this is interesting. When he says Hein, Heina, these are, generally that's the demonstrative pronoun, right? This, these. It tells you that they recognized these women, the ones who had prostituted themselves. Zohi shenichshal ploni ba, and they could actually say, this is the one that so-and-so, ploni means so-and-so, stumbled, that's literally, right? Michshol is a stumbling block. In other words, they did the wrong thing. They made a bad decision regarding. So this is the woman with whom so-and-so committed this act. Bedavar bil'am. So now notice it says devar bil'am, and we know that ledaber means to speak, right? So in other words, in what Bilam told them, amar lahem, okay? He said to them, this is what I believe Bilam said to them, afilu atem nachnisim kol ha-monot, okay? This is what this looks like, okay? In other words, even if you gather together, right, bring in all, I'm looking to see. Okay. He says, so I think this is a Vav. It's hard for me to read this. I don't know, Lauren, I know you have a Rashi that's printed better, but at any rate, this says other texts, Farim Acherim, have Ha'umot, which would mean the nations. In other words, even if you gather together all the nations, Monot Limnot means to count, so maybe it means all the populations, Sheba Olam, that are in the world. Ein atem yacholim lahem. You're not going to be successful against them. You're not going to be able to overcome them. Shema marubim, because are you in fact greater? This is speaking right to the Midianites and the Moabites. Are you greater? Min hamitzrim. Are you greater than the Egyptians? Shahayu shesh ma'ot rechev bachur, who were 600, right? 600 charioteers, bachur, chosen, picked charioteers. But so I'm sorry. So bo'u, come, he says, va'asiachem etzah, and I will give you advice. In other words, Bilam was saying to them, you're not going to use military force, is not going to help you, no matter what. So here he goes. This is something he says to them. Elohehem shel elu, the God of these people, that is of the Israelites, right? Soneh zima, he hates lewdness. Who? He is one who hates lewdness. V'chule, etc. Kedeita, as we find the Chelek in Parsha, in the chapter called Chelek in Sanhedrin, Uvesifrei, and of course that is the Midrash on Numbers and Deuteronomy. So, in other words, the Devar Bil'am is referring to this advice, and that's exactly why he told the Midianites and the Moabites to go and commit harlotry with the Israelite men. And that's why there was a plague. So the idea of lewd behavior being the antithesis of what is considered to be Israelite tradition, okay, the high moral standards. So here's what he says. Okay. V'ata, he says, and now, consequently, Hirgu chol zachar bataf. Look at this. It's just really tough stuff. He says, kill all the males of the children. He says, kill all the male children. V'chol isha, and any woman, every woman, your da'at ish, who has been intimate with a man, lemishkav, who has experienced intimacy, lying with a man. The mishkav zachar, of a male, harogu hill. And this particular sentence, of course, is extremely troublesome. And and by the way, the interpretation of this makes it even more troublesome, as you'll see in a moment. How one rationalizes this is very, very difficult. Again, the best, I'll go ahead and do the Rashi. This is not easy for me to do from an understanding point of view, but here we go. V'chol isha yodat ish. So this sounds like any woman who's experienced intimacy, sexual intimacy, right? With a male. Re'uya, but he said in Yevamot, in Tractate Yevamot, in the Talmud, it says Re'uya lehi ba'el. So they're saying it doesn't mean that she's actually experienced it. It means that she is fit for intercourse. Af al pi. And Rashi, if there's any doubt in your mind as to what this means, right? He says, Af al pi, even though shelo niv'ala, even though she herself has never had that experience. Ulifnei, so what was this? So how did they know this? Ulifnei hatzitz ha'evirum. So they took each woman and they placed the tzitz. Remember, we referred to this as already. This is this in ornament that the high priest wore on his forehead that said Kodesh Lashem. It had the words Kodesh Ladonai engraved on this gold ornament. They took this ornament and put this in front of them, Evirum, V'haru'uya lehibael, and one who indeed was capable of intercourse, Paneha morikot, her face would become pale. So, I'm certainly open to comments and concerns, and with this,
Green.
yeah, I
Her
know,
face.
yeah.
Yeah.
From Yarok, but I would understand. Okay, that's one interpretation. However, it is also the word rake, which means empty. So, in other words, it became.
So the blood drained from their
Well,
faces.
I think that makes more sense in some ways than, that's an easier shot than saying they turned green. Okay. Although sometimes, they say you turn green, but usually that's that at least in English tradition, that's more from envy than anything else. So on the other hand, and perhaps I'm wrong grammatically on this, but I know the word rake does mean empty. So in other words, it drained of blood.
Okay,
Go ahead. Yeah.
of course, I'm having difficulty with it.
Of course.
I knew you would. I knew.
Lisa,
It's-
Lisa, I'm having difficulty with it.
But
Go ahead.
to me, it
Yeah.
sounds like almost witchcraft, that, you think that this object can tell it, so then, it doesn't work out to, the way the perception is that it should be read, then you have the excuse to be able to, do.
Okay. So I misunderstood as to what you were having difficulty with. Lisa, I'm going to try and explain this one to you. Okay. All right. The truth is that when we do things in private that we would be ashamed of to do in public, because we know, especially if we are aware that they're inappropriate, what happens? We become ashamed. And here is this very holy object that says holy to God. And I could play around with that a little bit, saying that I don't think that's me, by the way. Okay, that what it's saying is that we as human beings are holy to God. We need to live our lives in such a way.
That's where.
When they saw this, they were ashamed.
Okay, so I understand that psychoanalysis of the story.
Right.
So that's not what I was talking about.
Okay.
And also, that's a lovely thing to share, though. It is a perspective. The thing that just gets to me about these things, and it's just another perception, is how these things that are written here can be taken to other ways of thinking and then applied as if it was okay to do it. Not that we are studying this and getting different perspectives of, all of the levels. It just really does disturb me that I've just seen in so many different scenarios how people have used these kinds of things in order to control others, to do ill towards others. So.
Okay, I understand, and I totally get it, and this is not surprising. Okay.
Well, it's everything's valid. Everything that we're saying, whether we look at it as a psychoanalysis or we look at it as, a reason for actions, it's all valid because we're studying it.
Correct. Okay, so I go back to something that I said much earlier on. Okay. And because I know these things, because to the degree that I've studied, sacred literature, I'm aware of these problematic areas. And so I go back to certainly what's coming to mind right now, okay, is the fact that this is a test of our hearts, okay? On the one hand, I could say, suppose we didn't have the Bible at all. Would people still be committing such horrendous acts? And the answer is they'd be even worse, okay? Is that an excuse for the Bible to do what it's doing. No, it's not. Okay, but at least we're better off with this. And the truth is that's why we need the Rashi, and that's why they say Torah is not acquired except b'chavruta, except by doing this in the way that we're doing this together, where I'm trying to share with you what I have learned, and where hopefully you feel very comfortable challenging me or questioning me or doing this. In other words, it involves that process, which I think you're saying as well, by the way.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I feel totally safe
Yeah.
to have these exchanges of
Okay,
ideas.
right, they're important. I go back to something that I shared earlier on, and that is there's a statement in Pirkei Avot says there are 4 types of students that are symbolized by a sponge, a funnel, a sifter, and a strainer. This is describing their personalities and their learning capacities. The sponge absorbs everything, doesn't make any distinctions, just absorbs everything. The funnel is in one end and out the other. They don't retain a thing, okay? The sifter sifts out the fine flour and removes the bran, okay? And the strainer lets the wine pass through and retains the dregs, okay? From this, I infer that, in fact, the material we have is raw material. This is raw material that we're dealing with. And it requires, obviously, what you need to try to be is a sifter, and not a sponge, and not a funnel, and not a strainer. And to recognize that, in fact, there are going to be things here in the Torah that we can certainly learn. Sometimes you learn by negative examples, okay? The other piece too is to understand that everything has its context, okay? I feel, in my own heart and in my own experience, I cannot justify just random killing, okay? I don't even sense that in this particular case, we're looking at a just process by means of which these women are being killed, okay? There is some justice if we're talking about the women who actually committed this, and if we sense that this is a capital offense. And over that, of course, we could question as well. But that requires actually a lot of deep thinking as to our own values and what we believe. There's also other issues having to do with how we look at our mortality as human beings, and whether or not we feel, it's how we look at the purpose of life. All those kinds of things get rolled up into what we're looking here at here. And if we were given the information that said that in doing what Moses told them to do, right, the souls of all these people that were being killed were actually getting cleansed and going into a space and a place of great, of health and beauty and paradise, essentially, we might look at it differently. But of course, I can't guarantee that. It's not something that is revealed to us. But there are things that are not revealed to us, which possibly, if they were revealed to us, we'd look at life in a very different way. And honestly, to the degree that we see life as something in which to get the maximum amount of pleasure with the least amount of trouble, troubles me too. That is not the way to look at life. And unfortunately, that is somewhat of a modernistic kind of way of looking at things. And it doesn't apply, by the way, to most of the world's population. And then it raises expectations that are unrealistic, which is why I think many people who shouldn't be are, in fact, at least spiritually depressed, because it isn't living up to their expectations. So I know I've gone far off what you're raising, but nevertheless, these are all involved in this kind of stuff.
Right. And I have never really been drawn to looking at this deeply. And so, like Lauren often says, it's, because of the way you teach. So you bring your experience to this, and also you bring an openness of dialogue that I really appreciate.
Well, how much do you think I appreciate the fact that you and others are willing to tolerate this, right? And are willing to be open to stuff that I know could easily turn you off and say, I don't want any part of this.
Well, it
Okay.
doesn't surprise me why it turns off so many people.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But that's
I'm just going to say that if you are scared, usually your face drains of blood.
Mhm, mhm.
So I don't see this as a really good litmus test, but that's just me.
Yes, good.
Yeah, I'm thinking, yeah, no.
Yeah, yeah.
So they're taking the 10 and unders is what you're saying pretty much.
Well, I think I know we're
Yeah.
way over time at this point, and I'm still recording this, okay? But I think it's important, and if there are people who are going to listen to this, I hope they feel benefited by it, okay? Look, I think we have to understand there are so many things we don't fully understand, and the level, the symbolism of the high priest's garments, etc. I think we just have to accept this for what it's saying. And then we can decide how well can we apply this. But I don't politicize this. I try not to anyway. And I don't try to look at it from, to see what political points is it trying to draw. I really don't think it was written in that particular context, but that's an opinion. And there are those who would disagree with me. I really, want to try and take it at face value that when Rashi and quoting the Gemara and the Sifrei talks about the power of the tzitz, this is something, that applied back there, and they understood. So it is what it is. Let's see if I know I'm over time. Let me see if, okay, I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to put in the little marker, and we will try and pick up from here tomorrow. So we're actually in the Rashi, and I'm going to mark it down here so that I'll know where to go. That's where we are right now. And
I'm going to try to find my copy of the 5 books of Miriam.
Okay. All right. Very good.
Because the women need to be able to be heard.
Okay.
So
Absolutely.
they may have something brilliant there. So
if I want you to be open, obviously
Yeah.
I have to be open too. Okay.
Sure.
Up the share. Okay. And we'll stop the recording.